Thank you, Kevin, for those beautiful words. As you can tell from the title of this program, we are looking to the past as we celebrate the Senator's work with Native people, and we are looking to the future in terms of building on the foundation of that legacy. Most of the people who will be speaking today had close personal relationships with the Senator, working in different fields, but all under the umbrella of Native American policy and federal Indian law. Before we begin the program, I would like to take one moment for those of you here to be introduced to, as he stands, the Senator's son, Ken Inouye. Ken, if you would please stand. Ken's wife and daughter will be joining us later today. For our first speaker today, under the theme of building upon the foundation of the Senator's legacy, is John Echohawk, who has been the director of the Native American Rights Fund for many, many years, and has worked with the Senator, is one of three people, I would say, John Echohawk, Professor David Getches, and Professor Charles Wilkinson, who pretty much taught the Senator everything he needed to know about federal Indian law and sovereignty. And so, John, may we call upon you?
Thank you, Patricia. And you were really the one who taught Senator Inouye everything he needed to know about federal Indian law. I'm very honored to be asked to participate in the symposium today on the life and legacy of Senator Inouye. I was very fortunate to have been able to make his acquaintance and work with him for many, many years. I was really able to do that because I was involved in several tribal leaders forums when Senator Inouye came on the scene in Indian affairs. These tribal leaders forums organized by the American Indian Resources Institute and their executive director, my good friend Richard Trudell, and it was really extraordinary. Again, with Patricia's help, we were able to have the Senator spend much time with us out in Indian country in various locations, meeting with tribal leaders and listening to tribal leaders about their concerns and their needs and what they wanted the Senator to know about them and what they wanted the Senator to try to do about that. And the Senator would listen and spend a lot of time with us and ask questions. And in that process, I got to know him quite well and really cherished his affection for Native peoples and his friendship. That continued for many, many years in the work of the Native American Rights Fund in terms of several hearings over the years on different bills, some of those of which Kevin Gover talked about, and I really enjoyed working with him on many of those bills. Most recently, just before he passed, I think in 2010, I participated in another hearing, and it was really the last time that I saw the Senator, and he was, of course, very interested in the issue of the day at that time, and that was the impact of the decision by the United States Supreme Court in the case of Cartier against Salazar and the litigation that had spawned, and how it basically made it very difficult for many tribes across the country to have land taken into trust for them, which of course builds their future, and the senator was very concerned about that. And after the hearing concluded, of course I talked with other panelists and participants there in the audience, about the way the hearing went. And during that time, I noticed the senator come down from the dais, and there were many of us down there in the audience, and the senator sought me out and walked right up to me and treated me just like an old friend, greeted me warmly and talked with me, and I was just really taken aback that he would take the time to do that, because I guess, we were old friends. But today I want to talk primarily about building on the legacy and looking to the future. The senator laid such good groundwork for us, addressing the priorities of Indian country that he learned from Indian people themselves. He knew that was the way to put together an agenda for Indian country, and that was to carry forward Indian country's agenda, and that's what he did. He focused on the priority items that he heard from us, and that's much the same that we try to do at the Native American Rights Fund as the National Indian Legal Defense Fund, addressing the priority issues of Indian country in a legal way. Of course, that starts with protection of our tribal sovereignty, and of course the senator came to know all about that and become our greatest advocate and protector of our tribal sovereignty. In that regard, it really starts at the top in the legal arena, and that is with the United States Supreme Court. And for many years during my lifetime, the U.S. Supreme Court has been a real advocate for tribal sovereignty, upholding tribal sovereignty. But as the makeup of the court has changed over the years, that is no longer the case, and anymore we have to try to avoid the United States Supreme Court because they just aren't very sympathetic to notions of tribal sovereignty that are embedded in United States law. This became a crisis issue in Indian country in 2001, when once again we saw several of the Indian cases that we should have won under the Indian law principles that we knew be lost, and see the court change Indian law as we knew it through their own unique and devastating interpretations. At a meeting called by tribal leaders here in Washington, D.C. to address this crisis, the tribal leaders invited Senator Inouye to come and address the meeting, of course, as we often did, and of course he always accepted those invitations. And that meeting was held here in Washington, D.C. on September the 11th, 2001. And Senator Inouye came in and was making a speech, and along the way some aides came up to him and whispered something in his ear, and he took a little time listening to them, and then came back to the podium and said, friends, I'm going to have to cut my remarks short because I've been notified about a tragedy happening in New York City at the World Trade Center, and the World Trade Center's been hit by a plane, and we need to see whether this is terrorism or whatever it is, and deal with it. And he asked that we carry on. He knew that this meeting about the U.S. Supreme Court was very important, and he said, just like the sovereignty of the United States is under attack in New York City, the sovereignty of the Indian tribes is under attack in the United States Supreme Court. And he encouraged us to keep meeting, and he would keep us up to date on what was happening in New York City, and he did that through his aides. And the tribal leaders in response, of course, were very shocked, and once they gathered themselves, they decided to continue that meeting and form the Tribal Supreme Court project to address these issues in a concerted way, and understood that the senator delivered the right message at a time of crisis, and Indian country was in crisis, and we needed to address that, and we have. And that project has now been going 13 years. We've done the best we could, but it's still a very difficult issue for us. One of the other things the U.S. Supreme Court project did, and the tribal leaders did that day, was to create the Judicial Selection Project, recognizing that we had very few of our federal judges, Supreme Court justices, of Indian descent, or really of much knowledge or experience in Indian law and Indian country. And tribal leaders set about starting a project that would develop nominees for federal court vacancies and have them be native attorneys or attorneys experienced in Indian law, and hopefully start to change the outlook in the federal courts through that process. And I think, as some of you here today know, that happened yesterday in a big way. We had a Hopi woman from Arizona, Diane Humetua, confirmed by the U.S. Senate as a federal district court judge in Arizona, and that's, I think, a great accomplishment for us and part of the legacy of Senator Inouye. The senator also helped us focus on issues protecting natural resources in Indian country, our homelands, our water rights, our hunting and fishing rights, and over the course of his tenure in the Senate, we were able to settle many of these land and water rights claims. The Native American Rights Fund in particular worked and is still working on tribal water rights claims on behalf of 6 tribes, and over the years we've been involved in 9 of the 27 cases that have resulted in tribal water rights settlements, and we continue to work on those issues. Dick Trudell is having another tribal leaders forum on this very issue here at the end of the month, and I know he's inviting everyone in Indian country to come address this issue, which is very, very important to tribes in the West. Senator also helped us defend our native religions and our culture. We continued to work with him on these issues of sacred places, and today work with Sujan Harjo and the Morning Star Institute on these issues. We were very fortunate to be involved in early litigation that helped to start returning the human remains and burial goods of our ancestors from museums around the country, and it got to be such a huge flood of litigation that ultimately it cried out for a legislative solution, and the senator helped us craft and pass the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, and I'm very pleased to be working with the Association on American Indian Affairs today to basically take this concept of repatriation internationally, because there are many museums around the world that also have the human remains and burial goods of our ancestors, and they need to be returned to their rightful owners. Education was a priority of the senator as well, and in Indian education, we've worked with him on many things. Most recently, the Native American Rights Fund has been involved with the Tribal Education Department's National Assembly, over 100 tribal education departments, and they're all busy negotiating intergovernmental agreements with the states and public school districts to have these states and public school districts recognize tribal education codes that basically assert tribal sovereignty in a concurrent manner with the states over the education of their children in the public schools on the reservations. And these intergovernmental agreements and the programs that they spawn are greatly increasing the graduation rates of our Native students out of these schools, and reducing the truancy rate as well. Government accountability is another priority of Indian country. It's one that the senator worked on in terms of helping us ultimately get a resolution of the Cobell Trust Fund litigation. That work for the Native American Rights Fund continues today as we represent several tribes in the effort to have them gain accountings for their tribal monies that are held in the trust account system of the federal government. We've been able to resolve many of these cases with the assistance of the Obama administration and have several more pending in negotiations today, and hopefully we will finally finish off this whole issue of accounting for Indian funds that has plagued Indian country for decades and decades. I know the senator held a special place in his heart for Alaska Natives and Native Hawaiians, and at the Native American Rights Fund we have worked on those issues and worked with the senator on those issues over the years. We've made much progress in terms of asserting tribal sovereignty and the protection of natural resources in Alaska. Most recently, we were able to establish that Indian tribes in Alaska are able to have lands taken into trust for them, just like the tribes in the lower 48. That the right to have lands taken into trust for them was not taken away through the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, and that the tribes are entitled to have land taken into trust for them in Alaska. And that's, of course, going to change the future of the tribes in Alaska. The issue of subsistence hunting and fishing rights is of particular importance in Alaska, since so many Alaska Natives depend on hunting and fishing for their livelihood, for their daily food. And we have been battling the state of Alaska for 27 years in the Katie John litigation to establish those subsistence rights, and most recently won the latest victory in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals upholding those rights. And we're able to have the U.S. Supreme Court turn away the petition of the state of Alaska to once again challenge subsistence hunting and fishing rights in Alaska. And finally, in Hawaii, we have been involved there since the early days of the Native American Rights Fund, when Native Hawaiians showed up on our doorstep in Boulder, Colorado, asking if they were Native Americans entitled to our services, and we weren't really, of course, familiar with them, and we took it to our Native leaders on our board of directors, and they weren't really familiar with Native Hawaiian issues either, so they asked our founding director, David Getchis, and I to go check it out. So we had to go to Hawaii, unfortunately, to see what was happening out there and what we could do. And of course we found that Native Hawaiians were very much Native Americans, very much like the tribes here on the continent, and had Aboriginal sovereignty and rights of all kinds to land and religion and culture, and we set about to help them protect that. We did it primarily by helping them establish the Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation 40 years ago, and I'm pleased the Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation will be celebrating their 40th anniversary here later this year. I was really fortunate at one time when the senator decided to focus the efforts of the Indian Affairs Committee on Native Hawaiian issues, and held a series of hearings. I think it was in the late 80s or early 90s. I can't really remember, Patricia, but I was very pleased when I was invited to accompany the senator and the committee and the staff for the week-long set of hearings in Hawaii. And during that time I got to spend quite a bit of time with the senator as we flew around the islands attending these hearings for a whole week, and that was a really very special time for me. I saw the senator really see what was happening in Hawaii with Native Hawaiian rights and how much he cared about those. He was accusing me at one point of helping to incite the revolution in Hawaii, all the Native Hawaiian people standing up for their rights, and he knew that the Native American Rights Fund had been out there and had helped start the Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation and had been advising and assisting Native Hawaiians on their rights, and he was, again, jokingly saying I was a rabble-rouser and this was all my fault. And you know how the senator was. He was a great jokester. But I could tell during that time how much he loved his Native Hawaiian people and the citizens of Hawaii, and what he was doing there was for the benefit of all of the people there in Hawaii, not just Native Hawaiians, and was really for the benefit of all Americans. He deeply loved this country, and that's why he devoted his whole life to helping all of us, and I was just very honored and privileged to know him, and he's established quite a legacy, and as a result of that, I think we all have a bright future if we just continue to do the work that he set out to do. So with that, let me thank once again the National Museum of the American Indian for allowing me to participate today. Thank you.